why they want to make a deal.
Now, it's possible that we'll have a deal because they want to make a deal. They want to make a deal more than I want to make a deal.
We're very close to making a deal. That'll be a great thing.
No, they want to make a deal badly. And we'll see if we get there. If we get there, they can't have nuclear weapons. You know, it's very simple.
And they will not have a nuclear weapon, and they want to make a deal so badly. We'll see what happens. Iran is dying to make a deal. We'll see what happens, but we hit them hard. Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be.
That's President Trump's "Let's make a deal" Iran version. And of course, no agreement yet. Welcome to the fourth hour of Morning Joe. It is 6 a.m. out on the West Coast, 9 a.m. here in the East. A full hour ahead. Thank you for being with us. We have with us MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, staff writer at The Atlantic, Frank Foer, and contributing opinion writer for The New York Times, Molly Jong-Fast. Thank you all for being with us. And we'll begin with the Middle East. Fresh strikes in the region are once again threatening peace talks to end the 3-month war and testing the tenuous truce between the United States and Iran. A U.S. official tells MS Now that the military carried out new strikes in Iran yesterday, shooting down 4 Iranian attack drones and targeting a ground control station in a port city that is along the Strait of Hormuz. The official added both the drones and ground facility posed a threat to the key waterway, saying, quote, "These actions were measured, purely defensive, and intended to maintain the ceasefire." Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, meanwhile, said that early today it retaliated against the latest round of U.S. strikes, claiming to have targeted the American military base from which they were launched, although it did not say where the U.S. base was or how it had been targeted. The IRGC also warned its response to future attacks would be more decisive. At the same time, Kuwait's army said yesterday that its air defenses intercepted hostile missile and drone attacks. This morning, U.S. Central Command blamed Iran for that attack, saying that Tehran launched a ballistic missile toward Kuwait overnight that was intercepted by Kuwaiti forces, with CENTCOM calling it an egregious ceasefire violation. That's noteworthy. CENTCOM, as it's characterized some of the other recent spasms of violence, has really downplayed them. Not this one. It's saying it's an egregious ceasefire violation, and Kuwait is the country revealed to be the nation that Iran had indeed targeted. So in his cabinet meeting yesterday, the president defended his handling of the war in Iran, dismissing concerns about any political fallout ahead of the midterms. Trump also openly threatened Oman, which is a U.S. ally, over entering into any agreement with Iran on sharing control of the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job. But their Navy is gone, as I've said 1,000 times. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes. But we'll see what happens. Maybe we have to go back and finish it. Maybe we don't. Their whole economic system is broken down. They thought they were going to outweight me, you know. We'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night. That was the prelude to the midterms. People understand it. They know that, very simple, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I'm doing that for the world. I'm not doing it just for us.
President, Iran wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. Would you accept a short-term deal that allows Iran and Oman to control the strait? And would they have to open it immediately, or would you be open to that happening over a period of time?
No, the strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control it?
It's international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
So, David Rode, let's start with you and where things stand now. We know that President Trump has repeatedly extended the ceasefire. He's issued deadlines and ultimatums. He's walked them back. There have been other incidents where Iran has, by most measures, violated the ceasefire. The U.S. has largely kept its retaliation in check, not wanting to escalate matters. Point being, Trump wants the hostilities to stay silenced. He does not want to resume a full-fledged conflict. That is clear. But explain to us why the events of the last couple of days, including the impasse in negotiations, where over the weekend we thought a deal was close. That's clearly not the case. Why suddenly the tenuous truce may be really threatened?
Thank you. So today is May 28th. This is the 3-month mark of a war that I think the president thought was going to last a few weeks. And I just, the clips you showed were amazing, but I'm not talking to Iranian leaders, but it's very much my sense that Iran is not begging, dying, or intent on a deal. And I think the president has skillfully over the last several weeks raised this, these prospects of progress, but I just don't see that much actual progress over the main issues. Who's going to control the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's nuclear program? There isn't much progress. And the issue is, that these continuing strikes now that are intensifying between U.S. and Iranian forces. And I also think there's an economic pressure that Iran succeeds, Iran gains influence in the region and gains power by simply surviving and keeping the strait closed. And by that measure, they are succeeding here. And I had an analyst say to me yesterday, they think Iran has already won this war. They have stood up to the United States, taken control of the Strait of Hormuz, and not given an inch yet so far in most negotiations.
And to that point, David, in terms of who's winning the war, President Trump, entered this conflict with a state of war goals, aims for what were to happen. Now, he wasn't very clear about spelling them out. He certainly never issued a real address to the American people. But, we did learn what he and his administration hoped to accomplish. I know you have taken some time here looking at that. Please explain to us what exactly he did get done.
So, again, it was part of this 3-month mark to look at these things. The clearest definitions of success and the clearest summary of goals was that late night address from Mar-a-Lago on February 28th. And he set out, several things, about 5 things. They were to destroy Iran's navy. That has happened, but they only achieved that partially. It's large surface ships that have been destroyed. Iran still has hundreds of these smaller fast boats that can lay mines. The U.S. just attacked several of them several days ago. They have raised, as you can see in this graphic, they did achieve raising their missile industry, blowing it up. So it's much harder now for them to produce more missiles. What they did not achieve was destroying all their missiles. As you can see on the list, they have 70% of their missile stockpile left, according to intelligence assessment. And this issue of proxies in the region, there's no progress at all. Hezbollah is fighting Israel right now and not backing down. None of these negotiations address also their proxies in Iraq, and most importantly, the Houthis, who have shown they can shut down sea routes on their own, and then ensure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. No progress there. The Iranians are insisting they won't agree on anything regarding a nuclear weapon. And a 6th goal was this part at the end of that speech where he called on the Iranian people, the great people of Iran, to rise up and take control of their government. The president hasn't mentioned goal number 6, but that's because, sadly, nothing has happened. The Iranian people now have a more hardline regime ruling over them, and they're in a dire situation in terms of food and other basic supplies.
So, Frank, let's piggyback off of what David just went through, and frankly, what a number of our colleagues have written in The Atlantic in recent days. Whenever this war does end, and there's no guarantee it's going to be anytime soon, but when it does, it is very difficult to imagine a scenario where the United States can credibly assess the victor. Donald Trump, of course, will declare victory. He will. He always does. Yes. But yet, coming out of this, it would appear that not only were not these war aims accomplished, but the United States projects to the world in a much weaker way than when the war began.
Right. It seems like one of the primary Iranian goals at this point is to deny Trump that credible claim of victory. And what they've shown is that the United States is a superpower who could be waited out. The full force of our air power was deployed on Iran. And, not only, as David had shown, very few of our objectives were actually achieved, but in the course of this patience, Iran has been able to undig a lot of its missile sites from the rubble, that they are at something like, I think, 70% of their pre-war capacity when it comes to their missile capabilities, which is extraordinary given the munitions that were dumped on those sites. And you look at the way that this has played out. You look at the way, of course, that China and other countries are observing this, and they've seen how asymmetric warfare is an incredibly viable tactic against the United States, and they've seen the way in which there are limits to U.S. power and limits to U.S. will. And despite the fact that we engaged in this campaign, we are unwilling to put boots on the ground. We're unwilling to risk American life in order to achieve the objectives. And Iran has emerged from this war with new strategic advantages over the United States that we seem totally perplexed about how to manage.
David, I wonder if you could talk about what has not been achieved in this list and sort of where America is with that.
The missiles are a real issue, and I've had people in the region raise this to me, and that these are the missiles like the one they fired at Kuwait last night, and that Iran has shown an ability to destroy the energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in the UAE, and all these places. And just one separate thing, I think the president's increasingly frustrated. The fact that he threatened to blow up Oman, as was shown in that clip, that's a brand new demand if they somehow cooperate with Iran. But Oman is a long-term ally of the United States. And then this also, this demand that all the countries in the Gulf, the majority Muslim countries, agree to the Abraham Accords, agree to ending, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's existed for decades. The president's statements, particularly yesterday, just have further complicated these negotiations. So they have not achieved several things, as we talked about, and things seem to be getting worse in terms of what the president's saying in public.
Yeah, you go down the list. Regime change certainly not accomplished. The Strait of Hormuz, even more in Iranian control than before. And the uranium has not been addressed. And it does seem like President Trump, I agree with the assessment, and wrote about how frustrated he seems, including this last-ditch effort over the weekend, this out-of-nowhere effort to expand the Abraham Accords and to threaten U.S. allies in the Gulf, saying, well, we're not going to be part of an Iran peace deal unless you sign onto his initiative here. And that, of course, has received a very tepid response so far. Trump seems to be spinning his wheels, unclear where to go next. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rowe. David, thank you as always. That new piece available to read online now. Molly and Frank, stay with us. Coming up ahead on Morning Joe, a Google employee is facing insider trading charges after making more than $1 million through the online prediction platform Polymarket. We're going to run through those details. Plus, we'll bring you a look at how the markets are shaping up ahead of the opening bell following a new key inflation report. Pretty shot there, the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. 9:17 in the morning here on the East Coast. So there's new Commerce Department data that reveals inflation picked up to push prices higher for American consumers. Let's bring in the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and a New York Times columnist, Andrew Ross Sorkin. So Andrew, tell us more about these numbers.
We said this was going to happen, and it's happened. This is what economists have been predicting the whole time, which is to say that you have core inflation has now at an annual rate of 3.3% in April, and that is the Fed's gauge. We will see whether Kevin Warsh's Fed yourself. It just makes it harder and harder and harder, as we've been discussing interest rates anytime soon. So if you thought we were going to be getting relief in the context of what the interest rates that people will be paying on their mortgage, on credit cards and the like, that is not going to be changing anytime soon. And worse than that, it means also that the costs for consumers just across the board has clearly gone up. What we don't know yet, and we'll see this, and economists are expecting that as you move into the summer months, it could get more complicated, where we could see some kind of pullback. Like thus far, we haven't yet. But when you start to see numbers like this,
that up, and what a dismal picture for Republicans this November. We had President Trump say yesterday that he didn't care about the midterms. I mean, he's governing like that's the case.
Yeah, he's not exactly scoring high on the empathy charts right now with the way that he talks about the inflationary impact of this war. And one thing I'd love to get Andrew's take on is we're watching this, we're seeing the ways in which Asia has really borne a lot of the brunt of this crisis, and that this is really, it's a slow moving crisis as far as it relates to inflation and the supply chain hits landing on American shores. And so how far down the road are we in experiencing the aftershocks of this war?
So I think the sense is that we will know one way or the other. Thus far, it doesn't appear that we've truly felt it. I think we felt it at the gas station, but not in the way that folks in Europe or Asia have necessarily. I think the real worry is if this continues to be prolonged, starting in, say, August, September, October, and it's interesting because you start talking about the midterms and just what that starts to look like, it is possible that the start to see it impact earnings, you start to see it impact employment. I mean, from now, because it's really only 3 months from now.
All right. In other news, a Google employee has been charged with insider trading after profiting $1.2 million from bets on the prediction market platform tracked user searches and allegedly used that information to 25. In a statement, Google said the employee accessed confidential information, has been since placed on leave. Polymarket wrote on social media, with 2 out of 2 arrests in this industry resulting from our. This is in reference to the arrest of a U.S. Army Special Forces sergeant who was Nicolas Maduro. Andrew, this is the topic of your deal book. Only 2 arrests for insider trading. We know how prevalent these marketplaces suddenly are.
Well, look, this is the big question about what constitutes a financial, a fiduciary duty to an employer, to somebody else when you're making these bets. You know, could somebody be betting, Jonathan, on what you're about to say, the next segment that's coming up? Could a producer or a camera person or even a guest who's walked through the building this morning, who's seen your rundown, for example, could they go place a bet on Polymarket or Kalshi? Do they owe some kind of fiduciary duty back to somebody else? If they're an employee, they may. If they're a guest, for example, maybe they don't. Historically, in the stock market, it was very clear what insider trading was. If you had, therefore, you could not go trade on it. We've obviously discussed this in the context of the Senate and Congress and the White House, but now you have this happening in all sorts of other realms, and there are times where they're gleaning from companies that they work for or people that they're around. I recall people apparently who were actually in the theater, who were Academy members, who were making bets on Kalshi and Polymarket about who was about to win. And if you go back and look, they were like 99% of the bets were, the odds always picked the winner. Why was that? Because so many people had information.
The wager that I was going to thank you next. So she just completely cleaned up. Well done, Molly.
Bingo, Molly. I hope you bet a lot on that one.
CNBC's Andrew Sorkin, thank you as always. Software deal from the Department of Defense. The Pentagon announced the 5-year, $9.8 billion contract yesterday. Dell will provide a suite of software for the U.S. military, including Microsoft 365 and cloud subscription process, but some are questioning the timing. Earlier this month, financial disclosures revealed that President Trump purchased millions of dollars in Dell stock. The company at an event earlier this year.
I also want to thank Michael and Susan Dell. Dell, go out and buy a Dell computer, because they don't care about that. They care about this. They make a great product. They're not looking for any publicity. I give them publicity. They say, well, thank you very much, but it's okay.
Go out and buy a Dell, the man said. Last year, Dell CEO and his wife pledged known as Trump accounts. And I mean, Amali, yes, questions indeed are being raised about the timing.
Yes, is it really a coincidence that all of these things happened in such rapid succession? Frank, I'm wondering if you could talk about, so Democrats could win the House and the Senate. If you are a Democrat in leadership, what are you think? Like, what would be the move here? Because certainly this.
I find it curious that Democrats have kind of given up on corruption as a master narrative for this campaign. I mean, you look at the ballroom and its unpopularity. You look at all the ways in which this president is clearly profiteering at the expense of the American people, that the system genuinely has been rigged. This is, and it happens to be glaringly and outrageously and world historically true. I mean, I can't imagine why all of the economic outrage that is clearly out there in the country isn't being channeled in a ferocious way by Democrats at the ramp.
Yeah, it is remarkable. And we've seen corruption as an argument that worked. That they add to their campaign arsenal this fall as well. Staff writer at Atlantic, Frank Four. Frank, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Still ahead here on Morning Joe, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said yesterday that a collapse in Cuba could harm the United States, just as the administration continues to squeeze the government in Havana. We'll play you the comments from the Cuban foreign minister to MS Now's Antonia Hilton about U.S. demands for the island. She'll join us next, right here on Morning Joe.
Cuba's in a lot of trouble because, unfortunately for them, it's run by a bunch of incompetent communists. And being communist is bad. Being an incompetent communist is like the worst. So we'll be talking to them. We'll be working on it. You know, we want something good for the Cuban people, and hopefully there'll be a good outcome there for them. There needs to be. It's 90 miles from our shores, and having a failed state 90 miles from our shores is a threat to the national security of the United States.
That was Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday during a cabinet meeting as he called the growing possibility of regime collapse in Cuba a national security threat. A new report this morning by Axios said the administration was preparing for the country's government to fall as early as this summer. MS Now anchor Antonia Hilton sat down with Cuba's foreign minister to discuss the country's economic crisis. She joins us now. Antonia, thank you for being here. Certainly there's been bleaker and bleaker assessments coming from the White House about the situation in Cuba, a long-held belief that Cuba would, quote, be next, whatever that means, once this Iran war is wrapped up. So tell us a little bit about what the foreign minister told you in terms of how things are there on the island.
Well, on the island right now, there's a humanitarian crisis and catastrophe. And not only did the Cuban foreign minister describe that, I have family members who are living there and text me and my loved ones on an almost daily basis about what they describe as a sort of game of survival. People are trying every day to find food, medical supplies. They're dealing with massive inflation. Think about trying to get gas at something like $30 or $40 a gallon. That would be the sort of translated equivalent. And then the sort of psychological pressure and anxiety that comes with not even knowing when you're next going to have power and light. Think about all the things you can't do when you don't have electricity. You can't keep medications that need to be refrigerated cool. You can't keep the food that you just struggled so hard to find fresh. And so people are under immense pressure to the point where even Cubans who are not supportive of Marco Rubio and the United States posture toward the country, they at this point tell me they just want them to do whatever it is they are going to do because they're getting exhausted at this point. And the foreign minister described much of the same. He really focused on what's happening at Cuba's hospitals, the fact that there are tens of thousands of people waiting for surgeries, including about 12,000 children. And so he really set the stage at the beginning of the interview, just of the level of crisis and pressure people are under as these bilateral talks He described them as, frankly, struggling right now. They're not making a ton of progress, Jonathan.
So let's take a look at part of your conversation with the Cuban foreign minister.
The blockade has absolutely played a devastating role, not just in the recent past, but over the decades. But there is the reality, too, that the United States is asking Cuba to make political and democratic reforms, to release political prisoners, to stop, they say, allowing foreign enemies like Iran, Russia, China, to have intelligence bases on the island. Are any of those things on the table? Are the Cubans willing to move on any of those issues?
In Cuba, there are no foreign military bases, nor there is any foreign personnel attached there, with the only exception of the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo.
You're saying you don't have foreign intelligence operations on the island?
I can tell you that I categorically assert that in Cuba there are no foreign military bases or foreign personnel, and no hostile action has been launched from Cuba.
So, Antonia, is there a fear in Cuba that this might go beyond economic pressure and that President Trump may authorize some sort of military operation?
Absolutely. I would say fear and anticipation in some corners. There are Cubans on the island who actually want Trump to take action at this point. They describe their lives as being completely unbearable. But the reality is that it might not be as easy as, you hear Trump sometimes make comments to the effect of sort of celebrating what happened in Venezuela, this idea that he may be able to recreate a very successful, sort of straightforward operation like that one. Cuba is different than Venezuela. They punch above their weight in terms of their military and intelligence operations. And so what the Cuban foreign minister has warned me, the president of Cuba has also said this in recent days, is that if the United States does this, there will be a bloodbath. That is the word they have been using, bloodbath. And he described not only will Cubans lose their lives, but he said many young Americans sent to the island to do that will lose their lives. They say Cuba is not going to launch any kind of attack. They deny the recent Axios report that, they've been planning some sort of drone attack. They describe that as basically a pretext from this administration, but they are warning that if the U.S. strikes first, they are preparing for that in the background.
When you talk about this negotiation, what is the action? What does America want from Cuba? I mean, that's what I don't understand. Like, what is the goal here? Do they want regime change? I mean, what are they asking for? And is there actual negotiation really happening?
Well, there are definitely conversations happening, but how much progress is being made, it doesn't seem like a ton, frankly, Molly. And that's because the question that you asked there, I mean, people have dedicated their entire lives to trying to answer that question of, like, what does the United States want to do to Cuba? I think if you asked Cuban Americans living in, say, Miami, many of them would say regime change or nothing. There has to be complete political and economic transformation on the island. But the sense behind the scenes is that what the Trump administration is most interested in is economic transformation. They would like to be able to do business deals. They would like to change the economic reality, but they might do something sort of akin to what we saw happen in Venezuela, where they're not so worried about when the next election are, right? Is there going to be a Delcy Rodriguez type figure? That might not be politically palatable to Cuban Americans, many of whom have supported Secretary Marco Rubio. And there may be some tension there when the time comes if they're not able to pull off this complete project that for decades, a portion of a very politically active portion of the Cuban American community has been angling for.
All right, MS Now reporter and co-anchor of the Weekend Primetime, Antonia Hilton. Thank you, Antonia. We'll be looking for your reporting throughout the day here on MS Now. Coming up on Morning Joe, the new effort on Capitol Hill to block President Trump from building a giant arch near Arlington National Cemetery. We'll talk about the legislation in Congress aimed at stopping that controversial construction. Morning Joe, we'll be right back. Pretty shot this morning from atop the Washington Monument looking towards the World War II Memorial, and beyond that, the Lincoln Memorial. And President Trump continues to campaign to renovate monuments across Washington, D.C. At his cabinet meeting yesterday, Trump discussed the renovations on, well, that very scene, the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, and then he previewed his next project, this time setting his sights on the World War II Memorial Fountain.
And now we're looking at the World War II fountain because that's also in pretty bad shape. On the bottom, we're going to duplicate it, I think, with the maybe with a slightly different color. Actually, we'll go with a lighter color.
It's actually not in bad shape. It's only about 20 years old. Meanwhile, House Democrats have announced a bill to block construction of President Trump's proposed 250-foot tall triumphal arch in the nation's capital. The Washington Post reports the legislation would explicitly bar construction of an arch on the small island where Trump seeks to build his project, which sits between Lincoln Memorial and Arlington National Cemetery. The bill would also ban the use of federal funds for the project and require congressional approval for any such proposal to move forward. The Democrats' bill, though, faces long odds in Congress with Republicans in control of both chambers. I would argue this arch is the most obscene of the potential Trump construction projects. That is sacred space between Lincoln and Arlington National Cemetery. We will now turn to a new novel highlighting an often overlooked yet vital chapter in American history. In The Lost Cities of El Norte, author Peter Stark goes all the way back to the year 1540 to follow the conquistador Francisco Coronado, backed by the mighty Spanish Empire, and his great expedition into the vast and uncharted interior of North America. But Coronado is soon met with fierce indigenous resistance, forcing him to turn back, ultimately thwarting European control of the region for the following 3 centuries. The New York Times bestselling author, Peter Stark, joins us now. Peter, great to see you. Talk to us as to why this moment in history inspired you, why you felt like that's the right setting for a tale that needed to be told.
Yes, that's a great question. And first, a minor correction. It's actually a work of nonfiction. It's a work of history. I try to make it read like a novel, and so.
Well, then you're doing a good job. It fooled the folks who put together your introduction there.
Okay. Well, that's good. I like to hear that. Yeah. So it's really at this particular moment in history, we're dealing with a sort of shift in empires in our current times. And likewise, this was a moment 500 years ago almost, when empires were very much in the air, that it was unclear who would be controlling the North American continent, for instance. And, today we think of the U.S. as kind of a done deal. Of course, it was preordained to end up the shape it was. It is, but that was not at all the case 500 years ago. That random fluky events could really change the course of history. And this is one of those random fluky events that could have changed the course of history and did change the course of history.
And tell us more about the central character here, if you will, in Coronado, a name that many Americans sort of dimly remember from their history books, perhaps, but you bring to vivid life.
Right. Yeah, so Coronado, like many of these conquistadors who came after Columbus, of course, 1492, and then the Spaniards started moving on to the mainland and colonizing the mainland. And so many of the conquistadors, like Cortez and Pizarro, were second sons of Spanish nobility or aristocracy. And, as a second son, 500 years ago, you didn't get anything. You maybe got something of a title, but you didn't get lands. You didn't get anything of value. And so a lot of these second sons, once the New World was discovered, of course there were hundreds of Indian tribes living here at the time. Once the New World was discovered, many of these second sons of Spanish nobility headed west to seek their fortune in the new lands, the Tierra Nueva, and they created New Spain. Coronado was one of those second sons, and he differed somewhat from the other second sons, and he was from a very highly educated background, and from Salamanca, which was the center of learning of Spain and in much of Europe, and it was sort of like growing up at Oxford, whereas some of these other conquistadors grew up like way out in hardscrabble western Spain, which is kind of like Appalachia, but without trees. So there was a difference in personality with this guy. And sometimes I call him the reluctant conquistador, because he seems conflicted about whether or not he's going to push forward as hard as he can. And he's also under orders from the King of Spain to treat the native people humanely. Because the earlier conquistadors had treated them so cruelly, word had got back to the Spanish court what was going on in the New World with conquistadors like Cortez, that the King of Spain made these conquistadors that under Coronado and those under him swear on a Bible that they would treat the native people humanely.
The new book, The Lost Cities of El Norte, is available now. New York Times bestselling author Peter Stark. Peter, congratulations on the book, and thank you for joining us.
Thank
Up
you
next
very much.
here, New York Governor Kathy Hochul puts up an airball when trying to talk trash with President Trump over the Knicks. We'll explain that just ahead on Morning. The NBA playoffs resume tonight in San Antonio, where the Spurs will try to force a Game 7 as they host the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder lead that series 3-2. The winner of the Western Conference Finals will, of course, go on to face the New York Knicks for the NBA title. That series is expected to draw a number of high-profile fans, including President Trump, who told reporters yesterday that he plans to attend one of the games at Madison Square Garden. That'd be games 3, 4, or 6. An attempt to call out the president over his Knicks fandom was somewhat botched yesterday by New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who challenged Trump to name the starting lineup from the 1993 championship team. The problem? The Knicks actually haven't won an NBA title since 1973. But Hochul did land a blow on the president's eldest son after Don Jr. chimed in on social media to defend his father's sports prowess. The governor's press office shot back with this. Crazy, he has time to go to a basketball game, but not your wedding. Woof. President Trump skipped his son's nuptials in the Bahamas last weekend, saying it was not good timing. President Trump has surely gotten no shortage of sporting events in his time back in office, but I got to say, this one, indoors, MSG, New York City, he's going to get booed, and booed loudly. We'll see if he actually decides to go. That does it for us this morning. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you again tomorrow at 6 a.m. Eastern for more Morning Joe. Ana Cabrera picks up MS Now's live coverage after a short final break.
There are places on this planet that no map will show you. Places so dangerous, so secret, or so sacred that even locals refuse to enter. Some were poisoned by governments. Some guard ancient mysteries. Some are protected by creatures that will kill you before you take a second step. These are the 10 most forbidden villages on Earth. Number 1, Pripyat, Ukraine. In 1986, this was a thriving Soviet city, home to 50,000 people. Children played in its parks. Families filled its apartment blocks. Then, on April the 26th, reactor number 4 at Chernobyl exploded. 3 kilometers away, within 36 hours, every single resident was evacuated. None of them ever came back. Today, Pripyat sits silent. Buildings rot. Radiation levels in parts of the exclusion zone remain so high that even a brief visit causes measurable cellular damage. The government posts armed checkpoints. Unauthorized entry is a criminal offense. Scientists estimate that parts of this city will not be safe for human habitation for another 24,000 years. Number 2, North Sentinel Island, 50 square miles of jungle in the Bay of Bengal, home to the Sentinelese, a tribe that has had zero contact with the outside world for an estimated 60,000 years. Every attempt at contact has ended in violence. Fishermen who drift too close are met with arrows. Helicopters are greeted by thrown spears. In 2018, an American missionary named John Chow attempted to reach the island. He was killed. His body was never recovered. The Indian government has made it a criminal offense to approach within 3 nautical miles of the island. The bow at the outer gate, but the mystery at its heart belongs to eternity. Number 5. Gruinard Island, off the northwest coast of Scotland. During World War II, British scientists came to this remote island with one purpose: to test anthrax bombs. They detonated the bombs above live sheep. Every single animal was dead within days. The anthrax spores embedded themselves into the soil and stayed there. The British government posted warning signs and formally declared the island off limits for 48 years. In 1990, they attempted decontamination using over 280 tons of formaldehyde. Scientists still warn anthrax spores can remain active in soil for over 100 years. Even now, locals stay far away. Number 6. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault, Norway, deep inside a frozen mountain in the Arctic, at nearly 80 degrees north latitude, humanity keeps its backup plan. Over 1.3 million seed samples, one from almost every food crop on Earth. Designed to survive nuclear war, pandemic collapse, asteroid impact, even catastrophic sea level rise. Access is strictly forbidden to the public. The vault is guarded, monitored around the clock, and buried inside permafrost engineered to remain frozen even if all power fails permanently. You will never go inside. But inside those frozen walls, life itself waits, patient, silent, ready. Number 7. Ilha da Queimada Grande, Brazil, 100 kilometers off the coast of Sao Paulo. And the Brazilian Navy has made it illegal for any civilian to set foot there. The reason? Snakes. An estimated 4,000 golden lan